here. I'm Heidi Carrington-Heath, a local resident here in Exeter and longtime listener of Crime Writers On. So excited to get to spend some time with this crew today. Friends, I'm so excited to introduce to you these three incredible people sitting next to me. We have Exeter's own Lara Bricker, author of Water Street Bookstore's best-selling book, Dead on Deadline, local cat detective, and general Exeter mischief maker, Lara. So glad to have you.
Thank you.
We have Emmy Award-winning journalist Kevin Flynn. And local to Durham, New Hampshire as well, Toby, author of the City Trilogy. Friends, welcome. We're really excited to have you, and I'd love to invite you to just tell us a little bit about how the three of you met each other.
It was a book event in Exeter, I believe.
It was. Actually, I met Toby first through a friend in Durham because Toby and I had books coming out at the same time. I had my true crime book coming out, and Toby had his first book coming out. And so we hooked up to do some book events, and then we were going to do these panels. It was like crime fact versus fiction. And so we did like the library tour together, and it was Toby, Kevin, myself, and Cornelia Reed, who used to live in Exeter, who's now married to Peter Riegert from like Law and Order, and also he was Boone in Animal House. So there was like this four of us, and we went around and we did this panel, and that was like 2010. Yeah, so it was a while ago.
My memory is...
You have to push the button, Toby.
Can somebody help turn Toby Ball on?
This is a family show, Kevin.
My memory is getting no questions. Like, we go to these library events, and they all ask you about these, about your cases.
Yeah.
Cornelia and I would just watch.
Pretty much. Yeah, that was it.
So tell us then a little bit about the journey from author to podcaster. How did the Crime Writers become the Crime Writers?
Well, when Serial came out, which is everybody familiar with the podcast Serial? All right, so that just baseline, we don't have to start. Maybe we'll just say it anyway. For the folks at home, you know, this Serial was a podcast that was put out by Sarah Koenig from This American Life, and it was about a potential, and of course we know the answer is that it was actually a wrongful conviction case. It's kind of a murder mystery, but it sort of got in the zeitgeist, right? Everybody was talking about it, and it was a sensation, and it wasn't on public radio, but because it sort of came from a public radio background, and my wife Rebecca was working at NHPR, you know, I was like, so you guys, this is really big, are you guys doing anything? And it was like, no. And are you gonna have any events about it, maybe a listening? But they said no. And there were other organizations that were doing serial companion podcasts, and Rebecca said, these really suck, and maybe we could do something. And she kind of left it there. And I remember it was Thanksgiving, and we were driving home from my parents because I think the power was out or whatever, and I just turned to her and I said, okay, if we want to do that podcast, we have to do it by Thursday, and we have to put the word serial in the title, or we're never going to do it. And then that's just, okay, fine, we'll do it. And we just said we need to get some people on the panel. And the original thought was we'd have rotating guests. And like, okay, we'll get, you know, who could we get? And, you know, we thought of Lara because she was local in true crime. And I think there was somebody else.
Yeah, so you reached out to me, and you were also going to have the maple syrup lady. The lady who wrote the Maple Syrup Mysteries, and because you knew her, we all had the same publisher at that time. And then I was like, what about Toby? And so then it was just Toby and I were going to be one-time guests. And we taped, I think the first time we taped was at the public radio studios. Yeah. And I had never done anything like that with recording. We were very poised. We all had notes.
There were 4 of us and 3 microphones.
Yeah.
So one of us was always going like this.
We didn't swear at all.
That time.
Now we have the explicit warning.
Yeah, but they were so good, and they had different points of view, different personalities, and their voices all sounded different. And we were like, we should just keep it, and hopefully they'll stick around and want to keep doing this for no pay. And and they did. And the rest is history.
Well, the rest is history, but we started at we didn't start at the beginning of Serial because it was already going, so.
Episode 10.
Yeah, and so we started, midway through.
People keep going, well, I want to listen to your reviews of episodes 1 through 9. How come I can't find them? It's because we never did them. That's why you can't find them. They don't exist.
Yeah. And then we had a break. So we finished Serial and we had a break. And we're like, well, we should keep this going a little bit. So every once in a while we do something.
Yeah, we followed Undisclosed quite a bit because that was the podcast that picked up the mystery and continued to do so we could talk about the Adnan Syed case, even though Serial wasn't doing anything new. And again, I think Rebecca in her wisdom said, we can do other things. And I'm like, but the people listening, they want their Serial. All they want is Serial. And she said, no, we can broaden it. And that's what we did, and we kept that big Serial listening audience. They stuck around for the rest of the craziness.
I don't know. Tell the truth, Kevin. I think we got a nasty gram when we had to take Serial off our title. I think that's when we had to switch course.
Well, we didn't have to take it off until we used to start the podcast with the theme music from Serial.
Yeah.
So, that piano thing. And Rebecca got, I think, an email with a scary subject line and an email address that looked like it was from somebody official, and she just deleted it. And she never opened it, but she got a sense of what it was probably about. And so we stopped using any of the Serial graphics or whatever, and we didn't drop Serial from the title because of a threat or anything, but we wanted to show that we were more than just Serial. So it was Crime Writers on Serial, and now it's Crime Writers on ... So it was like, the syntax on that's a little wonky, but it stuck.
And now you're real-life friends with Rabia Chaudhry.
Yeah, we are.
It's pretty amazing.
We keep hoping that Adnan Syed will be released soon, and we'll have that big party, and we'll go, and we'll be the only ones drinking because they're Muslim, and so they're just going to leave the bar to us, and we'll be celebrating. We think that's going to happen soon.
I think it's there's more promising news lately in that case.
Yeah, I mean, for those who haven't followed, they are going to be testing some DNA from the crime scene that had never been tested, surprisingly. And there are other legal avenues that are out there that could send him home, even though, his strongest appeals were, the conviction was overturned and then reinstated, and it kept going back and forth. I mean, it's very likely that he could be resentenced because he was a juvenile and sentenced to life in prison. And the U.S. Supreme Court said, well, you can't automatically sentence juveniles to life, so he could apply to be resentenced, which could be the 22 years he already served or something close to that. But I think he would really like a full exoneration.
I'm curious, as you've made this transition from Crime Writers on Serial, which felt like a really sort of focused enterprise, into the empire that is now Crime Writers on, what's most surprised you in that process?
That we're still doing this, I guess.
Yeah,
I don't know. I remember having lunch with Rebecca, maybe after we'd done it for 18 months or 2 years or something, and I was like, do you think we're going to be doing this in a year? Like, it's hard to imagine. But yeah, I think we were fortunate in that we kind of got in at the beginning of this new age of true crime, and I think if that hadn't happened, obviously we wouldn't have all this stuff that we could review and comment on, and there's too much stuff that's out for us to really sort of comprehensively cover everything. But yeah, I think it's the longevity of both sort of this new age for the genre, and then our audience sticking with us over years and years and years.
Our audience driving here from how many hours away? Jamie, did you come? 4 hours, somebody coming from Baltimore. We're like, it's amazing. Just our listeners end up just getting to know us because they've been listening to us. It's 8 years.
Yeah.
8 years.
Yeah. We've grown up. Why, thank you.
Yes. And a piece of what allowed you to do that is starting to monetize the podcast a little bit. Would you talk about how you started down that road?
Oh, Toby, you have to take this. The Amazon list, Toby.
Oh God, I almost forgot about that. So I think the first thing that we did is that, you can set up these Amazon stores where, whoever sets up the store gets a certain percentage of anything that's purchased. And so we had this thing where I would sort of deadpan read like the weirdest stuff that people got from Amazon through our store. And sometimes it wasn't the stuff that was weird, it was just the description of the stuff in Amazon that was weird. So at the beginning of our episodes, I would kind of read off, like t-shirts, size XL, all cotton, whatever.
There was the lube launcher.
Yeah, there was a lube launcher. There's stuff about like artificially inseminating calves or something. Yeah. Anyway,
It was artificial wait,
for Al.
For Al.
Yeah.
It's like, no, it's AI, artificial insemination.
Yeah. Anyway,
Who's Al?
so
Why is he getting artificially inseminated?
but that was where we did get the cease and desist letter. For some reason, Amazon didn't want us to do that anymore.
Well, because we were telling people to go to our link and buy things, and everybody was buying things because they wanted to be on Toby's list, and they wanted Toby to read their purchases on the podcast.
And I feel as though some of those things were just purchased to be read and then returned later, so that may have been part of the problem.
Yeah.
That's not our problem.
But we evolved from there.
Yeah, and then we ended up going through, the ad agency for podcasting, and in the beginning we used to get a lot of really cool stuff. We haven't gotten any really cool stuff lately, but like I got these shoes.
Yeah, the Federal Trade Commission says that if you endorse a product, you actually have had to have tried it, sort of that truth in advertising. So we did get, and by we, I mean Rebecca and I, and not Lara and Toby, a Casper mattress or two. The Sleep Number bed was pretty useless. But it was quite expensive and has all this cool technology. And if you're a guest at our house, you're gonna love it. But yeah, it was,
we would get
fresh.
We had like a big box of meat. Remember we had the butcher box? We're like, oh, we just got a big, and then it was like, ooh, it came with bacon. Ooh.
Yeah. But yeah, that's kind of slowed down a little. But there's a new set of advertisers that are coming through. So you never know. All of a sudden, it's somebody. There's an eyeglasses thing that they're trying to get us to try. So you'll hear us talk about stuff.
I got cat litter once.
Yeah. Oh. Pretty litter.
Yeah.
That smells funny.
Now they have Martha Stewart. They don't need me, I guess.
And the other way that we've monetized the show is through a subscription service called Patreon. And Patreon is a pretty standard website where artists and musicians and podcasters and models can set up a paywall. So there's exclusive stuff, and so if you set what the levels are, and if you pay this much a month, you'll get these things, or you can see that. And so we've just have some extra content, and people are willing to pay a couple of bucks to listen to Toby talk about a book that he's read with a couple of other guests in a book club. And this is the best thing. So that's like the $5 level. And we said, what if we did a $6 level? And that extra dollar, it would be stories from Lara Bricker going around town solving mysteries from Exeter. And that is now our most popular level.
Yeah, Leave It to Bricker.
Leave It to Bricker.
In which I solve mysteries, or at least mysteries to me in my little town.
And that one extra dollar is putting kids through school or something.
Yeah, something.
No, it's
buying my midlife crisis in front of the town hall.
That's my marketing genius. I'm so proud of the idea. Wait a minute, just one extra dollar.
Yeah.
And
We can't leave Lara out.
Yeah.
You can't support 3 of the crime writers and not the 4th crime writer.
That's true. And we're doing like merch.
Yeah.
It's a very small part, but it's more important to sort of have the funny or interesting T-shirts. You can get any kind of merchandise. It's what's on it. So we've got, Toby's famous quote, which is, "I enjoy a feud among subcultures." No one's bought that shirt yet, but it's just funny to have it. And someone did buy a Lara Bricker. I learned that in Cat Detective School.
Oh, I bought
shirt.
that.
Yeah. Oh, you bought it. Okay. All right.
And we have the Crime Writers on leggings, the Lara
Row
leggings.
Instead of
Yes. Some folks in the audience here have some of those, I know.
They're buttery soft, I'm told.
Yes, they're very
So,
comfortable.
for some podcasts, that's actually a big revenue source, but we haven't built it into that yet.
What
Or
are
if
the-
we ever do, I just want to let them know that we're making a lot of
Oh,
money.
Kevin.
One of the things I love most about your Patreon is how much you all interact with your listeners. It feels unique to me compared to other podcasts that I listen to. And I wonder, you really have a global audience. You often bring in listeners from all over the world. How did you make the decision to be so hands-on with us? And what's that been like?
I mean, I think that's just us naturally. I think that we're also really appreciative of that. I mean, I do have a background in broadcasting, both radio and television. So, for one, I'm used to strangers coming up and talking to me as if they know me. And I'm also the kind of person who can't recognize people I've met before. So everyone talking to me, it's like the memento disease where I'm just like, yeah, I'm wondering where I know you from, and I don't. But I think all of us, I don't think any of us have sort of felt like we've got a million fans, and so the interaction is not personal. I think it's just kind of natural for us that it's still individuals, and we still respond to people on Facebook, and we take that seriously because you have many choices, listening choices, and so thank you for flying with us. What do you think, Toby?
Yeah, I also think, our show is just talking about true crime stuff, and the people who listen to us also like to talk about true crime stuff. So it's, in my mind, it's sort of like an extension of the conversation, right? And I actually had a meetup in London a couple weeks ago where like 9 or 10 people came. And it was funny because I could have just not been there, I could have like said hi to everybody and just not said anything because everybody was just, everybody's just talking away about the same stuff that we talk about, right? So I'd like kind of interject here and there. But I think it is like, our podcast is sort of like a microcosm of conversations that are happening among people who like the genre all over the place. So like in my mind, it's like kind of fun to interact and like have people give me a hard time on Twitter about things that I'm wrong about on the show and stuff.
Yeah, and I think, and we all have like our individual, you guys are talking true crime. I have like the Richter Scale group on Facebook where we're talking about rage walking, cats, animals, things like that, and also true crime. But it's like I think we all sort of, because we have such unique personalities when we're engaging with people, we're finding people that have very similar interests. And my buddy Carol Baskin, who is a listener of Crime Writers On, is a cat lady friend, and it's like and
a Patreon member. Yeah, it's funny because my experience had been when you're like a local broadcaster that people will know, you'll bump into a lot of people that recognize you locally in the store or whatever. But if you take a trip, when I would like visit somebody in New York, nobody knows you, right? So you're anonymous again.
Tell the story of your vacation, Kevin.
Well, this is what I'm getting to. We, around, New Hampshire, not a lot of people recognize me from the podcast, because it's the same size audience, but it's just spread out over the English-speaking world. And so we went on a vacation to Turks and Caicos, this small island, and we were staying not at a hotel, but at this this apartment complex. We did a VRBO, and they had a pool and nothing else. And I went into the pool, and somebody by the pool recognized me, and she didn't want to say anything, so she said something to her husband, and the husband said, "Oh, so you finished doing your podcasting, huh?" And I'm like, yeah. I'm like, oh, I guess I've been spotted. So it's funny like that, Yeah.
And you've also, each of you really in different ways, grown into doing other podcasting from branching out from Crime Writers On?
I think Toby can
Toby,
take that.
yeah.
Toby's like the podcast baron now.
Yeah, I guess I did. I've done a couple of seasons of a show called Strange Arrivals, which is sort of taking a look at like UFO stories, but not really in a are they real or aren't they real, but like what kind of issues does the fact that people think they see UFOs or think they're abducted by UFOs, like why does everybody know what Area 51 is, even if you don't care about UFOs? Like how did that become so sort of ubiquitous? Yeah, and that kind of started as like having spent several years critiquing podcasts. I was like, maybe I should like see what it's like to actually try and make one. And so I was just going to do like a little sort of one-off, like 4 or 5 episode thing just to see what went into it and what kind of editorial decisions you make and all this kind of thing. But then Rebecca introduced me to Aaron Mankey, and he signed me up with iHeart. It just turned into this whole other larger thing. And then I've got some other projects that will be coming up in the next year or so, which I won't go into in great depth, but yeah. So that's actually become like a fairly large part of my sort of time outside of doing Crime Writers On, and my 9-to-5 job is working on these other podcasts. And again, that's not something I ever would have gotten into if it hadn't started with doing Crime Writers and sort of getting to know more about the industry and being really interested in podcasts and just spending you end up spending a hell of a lot of time thinking about podcasts and what makes them work and what makes them not work, and when you use interview tape and when do you use sound, Foley sound and things like
Never.
that. Yeah, well,
Kevin loves the Foley.
Yeah.
Kevin is, yes.
So we had,
I know what you're about to say. You're about to preview the next podcast we're doing, episode 2 of Yuba County 5.
I haven't listened yet. I haven't listened yet.
There's some.
It's horrible.
It's some classic recreations of a
guy pushing a car and having a heart attack.
It's really it's just as bad as you can imagine.
It's just as bad as you can imagine.
You heard it? Yeah. It's nuts. Yeah.
Oh, goody.
Unfortunately, we have to listen to the rest of it. We have no choice.
Like we have our best discussions, some of our best discussions, though, when we have something that we really hate, but then we have to tamp it down. But it's like we have some of the more fun discussions when we're like, well, that sucked, and now we're going to let loose.
I think the audience responds better to the stuff that we really trash.
Yeah.
Because they hate it too.
Yes.
Or sometimes we're just way more animated when we're shaking our head about something.
Yeah.
There's something we really hated recently. What was it?
Vigilante.
Manslaughter.
No.
All those things.
Oh, it was manslaughter.
Manslaughter was really bad. What was the never mind. It was so. The donut shop murder. That's what it was.
Oh,
the donut shop murders. Oh, man.
Are you a listener?
I do feel like you should have to have listened to a podcast before making a podcast. But I guess not everybody agrees with that.
Yes. Clearly.
Yeah. And so it's been interesting, like you're saying, how we've kind of evolved through the podcasting. And so it was like Toby's off there. We're like, wow, Toby's got this iHeart deal. Kevin is doing, his Law and Order podcast. And I was like, we are crime writers. One of us is going to have to write a book eventually. So because I was like, we have this audience and we have people that listen to us. And so that's how I ended up making the decision. I mean, I had been working on the book that is now dead on the deadline for a few years, but I was like, we have this platform, we have these listeners, and they will buy this book, whether it is good or not. No, because they will support the cause.
And you proved that.
Yeah, and it worked. But but that was where we saw like this momentum from this podcast, where when Steph back there was getting and Dan were getting the pre-orders at Water Street Bookstore, they were getting orders from all over the world from people who wanted an autographed copy and were willing to pay. Poor Steph, I don't know how much it was to ship to Australia, but it was like some crazy international shipping that people were willing to pay because they were listeners of the podcast and liked listening to us and wanted to support this endeavor, which was really cool. And we've had people come, like I had some people last fall who came here for a girls' weekend to Exeter that were listeners because I've talked about Exeter so much and how much I love it here. So now, like, I really think the Chamber of Commerce should be giving me a cut of something, but that
They'll
hasn't
build
happened
a statue
yet.
for you. Just don't pose for it yet.
Yeah. No, I'm like, so.
In that spirit, I wonder if we might take a couple questions from the audience.
No.
Friends, do you have questions?
Friends, please
Somebody's
ask
got
a question. The cameras are rolling.
Somebody.
Yeah, right there.
Right
Oh,
down front.
Vicky.
Oh, they're listening at home,
Garrett.
so yeah.
Thank you. If I become the $6 Patreon, will I have access to the prior publications?
Yes.
Yep.
You have the whole catalog. 269 podcasts, episodes, exclusive podcast episodes. Some of them aren't very good, but I mean, I don't know if you want to listen to our after show discussion from 3 years ago, but yeah, that'd be great.
It's the best $9 I spend in a month.
Thank you, Heidi. Yeah, and I always love when Heidi listens to something and it's something that I've done about town and I get a text message, oh my God, Bricker, I can't believe you talked about that. I'm like, yes, I did. It's behind the paywall, nobody knows.
Friends, in the spirit of today's event, can I ask you a few rapid fire questions?
Sure.
Okay, so give me your answer. First thing that comes to your mind, don't think about it too hard. Your favorite book?
I can't think about it very hard.
Can't think about it.
That's like a hard question. My favorite.
It by Stephen King.
Wolf Hall by Hilary Mantel.
I don't even know my favorite books. I'll just tell you my favorite author then, Anne Cleeves.
Love it. Most underrated author?
Toby Ball.
I was going to say Laura Pricker.
And no one said Kevin Flynn.
I think Jess Walter actually is my serious answer. I think he's great.
Dashiell Hammett. Excuse me. Dashiell Hammett. Yeah, you got that.
What's one piece of advice you would offer to someone looking to jump into podcasting?
Have something unique to say. There are a whole bunch of celebrity podcasts where I think a lot of celebrities are like, well, I'm stuck at home for months and why there seems to be a lot of gold in them thar hills, and I'll just get a microphone and my friends and I'll do an interview podcast. And I don't know how many different ways different B celebrities or A-list celebrities. I mean, how many podcast episodes did Prince Harry actually put out, but have something different to say, especially if you're talking about true crime. We know that just to have two friends and drinking a different bottle of alcohol and talking about the latest crime you found on Wikipedia isn't necessarily unique, right? So have an idea about something to say and, do the technology well.
Yeah, technology, definitely. It's something I'm still always striving for. I always turn to Kevin for my advice, and Kevin's like, hey, your microphone wasn't on last week. I'm like, oh.
Yeah, that was pretty bad.
Oh, shit.
Is that the technology you're talking about, is turning on your microphone?
Yeah, basically, yeah. That was when you were gone to Scotland on your
Yeah, I
rolling
know
tour,
that.
Oh, you
Toby,
missed
and
that,
my
yeah.
internet went out, and I rebooted my computer, and I was so stressed out that we had a guest, I didn't check to see my settings when I got back on. And
I did that on a recent deep dive when I couldn't get somebody into the crowdcast. Anyway, I think being patient is the other thing. Like, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I get a lot of people getting in touch, like, I want to get into podcasting and, whatever. And it's just like, well, yeah, that's awesome. And there, to a certain extent, the barriers to entry are fairly low, but you're not suddenly going to get 10,000 listeners or 20,000 listeners or whatever, and you may never, but you're certainly not, unless you're a big name, you're not going to get it right off the bat. So, like Kevin was saying, have something to say, and then also just be willing to stick with it long enough that you can build an audience. It may not happen, but it's almost certainly not going to happen overnight unless you've got a name that people know of. want to hear. And there's also, to understand like what your scale is. Like I've talked to people who want to do podcasts that are very specific to an industry, like to like somebody who wanted to do one about policing, and it was just going to be for police. Like nobody else was going to be that interested in it. It was like, okay, so realistically, how many people? Like, how are you going to reach those people? All that kind of stuff. It's like sort of having a plan for that.
Yeah, that would work, but you shouldn't also expect to make $1 million on that if you have a niche audience.
Right.
But that's the thing. I forget. I haven't looked up the stat in a long, long time. But I think 2 years ago, I believe the stat on Apple Podcasts was that there are currently 800,000 active podcast titles. With millions of episodes. So to break through is very hard. It's almost like, self-publishing. Sometimes you hit and, and then all of a sudden you're the next 50 Shades of Grey, which started off as a self-published novel. And other times you're Lara Bricker. No, I'm just kidding. You're
Kevin, I killed someone last night, right?
It's true, you did.
I mean, I'm
Death by chocolate.
for two. I've got a defense attorney in the audience who can help me get bailed out in time for dinner if I do it.
No jury would convict. I agree.
So friends, it's been 8 years of Crime Writers On. What's next?
8 more years, hopefully.
Year number 9.
Yeah, year number 9. I mean,
yeah, it's hard to say. I often wonder that because I'm like Toby said, I'm like, I can't believe we're still doing this. And then I'm like, I can't imagine not doing this. Like, I always compare us to I feel like we're like a band like the Beatles or something. And I'm like, when we're like 80, it's going to be like, remember when we did that podcast? And Toby's going to be like, yeah, that was interesting.
Yeah.
And,
yeah, it's funny. I'll just say this. Rebecca and I obviously have a legal bond, so we're stuck together. But there really is no. We don't have contracts with these guys, like saying you can only do this and you have to stick around. So it's kind of been like on goodwill. I mean, I hopefully you would agree that equitably compensated, but that the idea that if Toby just says F it and he's gone, I mean, there's nothing really holding him back. But we get along so well that there really have never been any big creative differences or things. It's been, mostly it's Rebecca and I grumbling, bickering with each other, trying to record.
Mom and Dad are fighting again.
Yeah. Well, if she would just listen.
Well, Toby and I text each other. We're like, oh God, they're fighting. They're arguing over how the microphone's set up.
Right.
Because she keeps changing it. I'm just saying.
Here we go.
Yeah.
It's a little insight into our recordings.
It's going to be 2 Christmases now.
Yeah.
I was just say that I am very grateful for the nature and positive nature of our relationship among the 4 of us, because that's not always, it doesn't always happen, but it does make it easy. And no one's ever said, I can't believe you made me listen to 10 episodes of that crap. Everybody's just kind of goes with it because that's the job, and everybody steps up every week.
We occasionally think it, though, Kevin.
You can think it, absolutely.
I'll sometimes say, oh my God, I almost died.
Yeah.
Although, I mean, we had, how many episodes was Anna Delvey? But I liked it, but it was like 10 episodes.
Yeah, I was like, oh my God.
10 hours. I could have used a wire transfer to get me out of there.
I don't have time for you.
You're so basic, Kevin.
VIP is the way to go.
Friends, as we move into our last few minutes, do you have any questions? Yes.
That's Heather Hill, who took a flight from Baltimore.
Yes, that's
with her
Heather
friend
Hill.
Tracy just to be here.
Who came
in
from
Exeter.
Baltimore. Yeah.
Can the locals give Heather a round of applause?
Heather.
Who's from the Chamber of Commerce?
She was here last night.
Yes.
Big fan since the beginning, and I was actually whispering to my friend here when you guys were talking about having sponsors and things, and I said I'm a butcher box person because of that. I said I'm wearing my Rothy's because of that. So there are a lot of things that I've bought because you guys, you were touting them, and so good for you. But my question is, what kind of What is your favorite thing to review? A podcast, a movie, a TV show? Because you do them all. So do you have something that you prefer to have to? I shouldn't say to have to, but that you prefer to review? Is there one particular thing that you're like, great, this is a podcast this week versus I have to sit in front of a television and watch like so many episodes?
I think for me, it really honestly, it doesn't really matter. It's the topic and it's how it's done. So sometimes there's a podcast that I love and I'm like, oh, this is awesome. And sometimes I'm like, there's something in TV or a documentary that's great that we watch. I think it really just depends on what it's about, honestly. And how much rage walking I need to do. When I'm doing my 3-mile loop around Exeter, I'm like, ooh, we got a podcast this week. That's good.
I have a very different answer, which is that I prefer podcasts because I have a long commute, and so I got a lot of time to kill in the car, so podcasts is awesome. But then if we have to watch like 16 hours of, prestige TV, it's sometimes hard to kind of figure that out, and I'm doing it in like 15-minute doses while I'm loading the dishwasher and stuff like that.
Maybe you need to shorten your commute.
Yeah, well, we'll see.
My answer has changed because I like good stuff. So it kind of doesn't matter. Sometimes like the podcast, like, why can you wait till the next episode? And the TV stuff's cool too. But I used to have a commute, and that's where I did a lot of podcast listening. And then when I lost that commute, gratefully I did, I kind of lost my space where I would consume podcasts. And a lot of people in the audience did too. They used to, if they're working at home, they don't have that commute, and that was the time they spent listening. We tried to lean in with the message that you don't have as much time, so let us tell you the quality stuff, and so you can make the most of that time. So I've kind of drifted, to something I can watch, but that doesn't mean that we don't do podcasts. We kind of look at what the schedule is. I will say that this spring, the networks are pushing out what appears to be a lot of good content. So we will be doing, some watching, probably more than listening for a little bit, but I still, try to make sure we get podcasts in there just to break up the, I don't, there was the week where I knew like we were going to be doing 16 hours of television. So I'm like, guys, this is coming up. So if you want to get started, that, just to try to take the sting out of it, especially if it stinks.
Yeah.
I love how you address everybody as friends, by the way. It's very wonderful.
Thank you. Do any of you have a favorite thing you've ever reviewed? Anything that rises right to the top?
Well, that's such a good question.
A favorite thing.
I can think of like things that are like in my top things, like In the Dark season 2 with Madeline Barron. If I ever get wrongfully charged with anything, she is the person I'm going to call, and she's on the case. That's definitely up there. S-Town, I enjoyed S-Town. I don't know. I'll pass it to Kevin, and I'll think of some other.
Well, I think that season 2 of In the Dark is probably the best thing we listened to, but I will say that it's not really enjoyable. I would not put it in the enjoyable category. It's right now they keep adding episodes because the case changed, but I think they're like 20 episodes, right? And they're long, and they can be pretty dense, especially in the beginning. So when you tell somebody, oh, so the best thing you have to listen to is this, it's probably not as enjoyable. I'll say that I really enjoy just about anything that Dan Taberski does, because he's just got this great storytelling style.
The thing about Pam, anything with Keith Morrison, when we have, oh my God, Toby hates it. I love it. It was a fine day, Toby, I love Keith Morrison. I want him to narrate my murder if I ever get killed.
Yeah, I feel like podcasts have just gotten so much better since we started, just in general. Like there are definitely some that hold up, but on average they've gotten so much better. And I think there's like some recency bias too, but like we listened to Wild Boys, which I thought was just really excellent, and we reviewed it about halfway through. And the second half was even more interesting than the first half, so that was great. I mean, there's been so many. I mean, I feel fortunate that this has been something that we've been doing, because I've been kind of forced to listen to things that I might not have listened to before, which I think are really pretty brilliant, like the Dan Taberski stuff. I think Bundyville, which a journalist named Leah Satilli.
Excellent. Again, not an enjoyable listen.
Yeah,
very scary.
Very scary.
But it kind of it's about super far right stuff in the Pacific Northwest. Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of good stuff. Winds of Change, which was Patrick Radden Keefe. We've been talking. I was talking to some people in the audience about him earlier, because he's an author who wrote Empire of Pain and Say Nothing, which are both great books. But he had a very fun and interesting podcast about whether the CIA wrote the Scorpion song "Wind of Change" back in the 80s.
We've done about 500 reviews, I think, at this point. So when it seems it's a simple question, but it ends up being a very complex answer, because you're like, oh, what? And sometimes I have to flip through the Google sheet and go like, oh yeah, remember that?
Well, that's what we did at the end of the year last year, because you can't even remember when we did our top podcasts and TV shows of the year. Kevin put together this list for us.
Yeah, and the good stuff was. Some of it wasn't really enjoyable. It was some really heavy stuff, but really good stuff.
Rebecca, did you have one to add?
Yeah, just so shocked that you guys get. I mean,
Could you identify yourself for the?
my all-time favorite podcast is a podcast called Suspect.
Yes.
Yeah, that was very good.
It's the best true crime podcast ever made, and it's my favorite thing I've ever reviewed, because I've never been more excited to talk about anything. If anyone ever listens to it, we end up talking about it for 4 days. So.
Wow.
That's very definitive.
Yeah, I was like, wow, okay.
Yeah.
How do you feel, Rebecca? Thank you.
She's not hyperbolic ever.
Rebecca has no strong opinions.
No strong opinions. Nope.
Any final questions as we wrap up? Well, friends, I want to thank you for coming, and a big round of applause for the crime writers, please.
Oh my gosh. And thank you, Heidi. Oh, you're all still clapping. And we have we're going to do a little wrap up here to the festival.